Hi everyone, welcome to Cutting Down the Nets. This is where we talk all things college basketball betting. We'll simulate some games, we'll look at some future value, and of course, come March, we will be going through some bracket simulations. So, my name is Kane. I'm excited to be here today. This video exists because I could not find any content related to this ever in the last, I don't know, 15 years. So I'm a novice daily fantasy sports player in the NFL and college basketball streets, and I've been betting college basketball games for about 2 decades now. So early on, I always wanted to find a way to set my own point spread and not just listen to a number that was thrown out by someone I respect. I needed to know what my number was so that I could compare it to what's available. It's really hard when you hear someone likes, this side of the game, like they like Georgia Tech in this game for whatever reason. What's that mean? At what point do you not like Georgia Tech? Is there a point where you end up liking the other team? And that's where having your own set of numbers is super important. So this video is going to walk you through how to do that, how to predict out a game, and how to come up with your own point spreads. Each day, I'll kind of highlight what I feel are the best plays. I'll be released very early in the day or even the night before. And I'm going to be very transparent with wins and losses. I don't make a bet if I don't think it's going to win. It has to have expected value. It has to be a plus EV bet. But will I win 100%? No. 80? No. 70? No. 60? Probably not. The last couple of years hovered between 53.6 and 58%, depending on the time of the year. So there will be good days, there will be bad days. We will laugh through the losses and we'll celebrate the wins. But I promise to be very transparent with what number I am playing, what number I would bet that game up to or down to. And you can follow along with the tools I've provided and decide if you are seeing things the same way or if you're seeing things a little differently, which is okay. So to predict a basketball game, you're not going to take the Clark Kellogg method of handicapping a game where you talk about length and heart and toughness. No, we're going to be looking at data. So it will get boring at times, but I don't make narrative bets. I make them based on data, and I want it to be based on good data. So some terms you're going to hear each day as I go through that day's plays are things like tempo free. So tempo free is looking at basketball data through a per possession lens and not a per game. How many points per game does that team score? I have no idea, and I don't care. I care about what they score per possession. The reason being is some teams play fast, some teams play slow. I need to know how good they are independent of pace. There could be teams that score 70 points a game and have a horrible offense, and teams that score 65 points a game that have an elite offense. So this is why I choose tempo-free stats. It's been the basis of many college basketball analytics sites for years. Ken Pomeroy, Bart Torvik will cover some of those resources. So what you've done by using tempo-free stats is you've leveled the playing field between fast and slow teams, and allows you to kind of handicap those as without any biases. So pace or tempo, I kind of use those independently. That's the number of possessions that take place in the game. Sometimes we're looking at the average number of possessions that that team has had per game over the course of a season, and sometimes we're talking about the expected or predicted pace or tempo for that upcoming game. So once you figure out how many possessions are going to be in the game, you need to figure out how many points per possession each team would score. So that's referred to as points per possession. Many websites show this as per 100 possessions. So example, 105.9 points per 100 possessions. If that team had the ball 100 times, we'd expect them to score 105.9. I prefer breaking that down as a true per possession number, 1.059, because we're going to calculate the number of possessions and do that math anyway. So we've leveled the playing field for pace. We're going to look at a true point per possession performance, both offensive and defensive. But how do we rate these teams that not all things are created equal? Adjusted efficiency levels the playing field. So it factors in how you performed against who. So if you score 1.2 points per possession against Baylor, that is an elite offensive performance. If you score 1.2 points per possession against Mississippi Valley State, that is a very middling offensive performance. And those numbers would be reflected in that game's adjusted efficiency. Don't worry, you don't have to predict that for the game. That's a lot of that readily available data that is free to use. So sources I get that data would be barttorvik.com, Ken Pomeroy at kenpom.com. He's kind of the godfather of college basketball analytics for my generation, and then Jeff Sagarin. So Pomeroy requires a subscription. I think it's like $20 a year. I've paid it for ever since it went behind the paywall. I don't know, 5, 6, 10 years ago. I lose track of time. And then Bart Torvik is free. I'm recommending Bart Torvik not because it's free. I think Ken Pomeroy is kind of the cream of the crop as it comes to basketball analytics. But Bart allows so much customization and he breaks it down on a game by game basis. And I just see more value in Bart allowing you to manipulate the data than than what Ken Pom does. Sagarin is kind of a power rating site, but he does all sorts of sports. I use him as kind of a guideline for home court advantage. Typically, home court advantage is between 3 and 4 points, but he's actually running formulas to tell you what that is for a given year. This is a year in which home court advantage is lower than it's ever been before due to having no fans and things like that. So what I want to do is I want to take a game on today's schedule. Temple is playing Cincinnati, and I want to actually forecast this one out together. I have watched a lot of DFS shows that are based out of Excel, and they have formulas involved. And then you see the formulas in a YouTube video, and they're up in the formula bar, and it's hard to tell, like, okay, so that's E2 times G2. So I want to start here so that you can see the formulas. They're really simple in how you use them to forecast a game. But I want to start here, and then we'll jump into Excel and kind of play with it a little bit after that. So we're going to look at Temple and Cincinnati. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what the pace of this game is going to be. Temple, for the year, is playing at 67.8 possessions per game, and Cincinnati's playing at 71.2. You get that data from Ken Pom or Bart Torvik. Again, once this is, we kind of walk through this one, I'll show you how to pull up that data. What it means is if Temple played an average pace team, you'd expect that game to have 67.8 possessions. If Cincinnati played an average pace team, you'd expect that game to have 71.2 possessions. This really comes in handy when you're forecasting two contrasting styles. So Virginia plays at about 59 possessions a game. So if they played an average pace team, you'd expect 59 possessions. But what happens if they play a team like Alabama or LSU that plays at a much faster pace? That's where these formulas are really helpful in projecting that. So it's pretty easy. What you're going to do is take Team A's season-long pace, 67.8, take it times Team B, and divide by the national average. So what you're doing is you're adjusting for how fast the other team or how slow the other team wants to play. So this example would be 70.6 possessions between these two teams. When we throw out a number like this, same as with the point spread, same as with points per possession, this is my best attempt at a median outcome. But over time, those median outcomes will have value versus the Vegas lines. Could this game have 65 possessions? Absolutely. I don't think it's the most likely scenario. Could it have 75 possessions? Absolutely. Do not think it's the most likely scenario. I think the highest probability is that this game is around 70 to 71 possessions, but I would not be surprised if that changes a little bit. Picture a bell curve with a normal distribution, and we're playing a probability game here. This is what I'm expecting to happen if these teams played. So after you figure out how many possessions each team will have in a game, all that's left is to figure out how many points per possession each team would score and then do the math. So let's start with Temple. Temple, using sites like Bart Torvik and KenPom, we're going to pull their season-long adjusted offensive efficiency. We're going to use season-long numbers in this example to give us a baseline. I'll show you how I massage that number a little bit, and sometimes it can be a little inflated or deflated as you factor in other factors, and we'll get to that down the road. So Temple's adjusted offensive efficiency is pretty average. They are currently averaging a 102.4 offensive efficiency, meaning if they played the national average defense, so a very middle of the road defense, we would expect them to score 1.024 points per possession. But today they're not. They're playing Cincinnati, who has an above average defense that only allows an adjusted defensive efficiency of 95.9 or 0.959. So you would expect Temple's number will go down because they're playing someone better than an average defense. This formula is similar to what we saw before. You're going to take Team A, Temple's adjusted O, 102.4, times Cincy's, and then divide it by the national average. We are expecting Temple to score 96.3 points over 100 possessions, or 0.963 points per possession. I told you there's a lot of math involved. You were warned. This is the boring part, but we're almost to the good stuff. So let's look at Cincinnati. Formula doesn't change. We're looking at Cincinnati's adjusted offensive efficiency of 100.9, so they're a below average offense, and Temple is an above average defense. So again, if Cincinnati played the average defense or an average team, you would expect them to score just over 1 point per possession. In this case, they're playing better defense. So we take Cincy's O versus Temple's D, divide by national average, and we come up with 0.961 points per possession. So we now have Temple's points per possession, Cincy's points per possession. Mash them together, and all that's left is to take those by how many possessions we thought would be in the game. So again, I have a median outcome of what I expect Temple to score on a per possession basis, and a median expectation of what I expect Cincinnati to score on a per possession basis. Take that times my median expectation for how many possessions I expect to be in that game, and I'm coming up with Temple winning this game by 0.2 points on a neutral court. This game is played at Cincinnati, so you would adjust for home court, and that's where we will jump to our spreadsheet to dig into that a little bit. So now you are seeing what you just saw, but in Excel format. Notice that there is the Google Doc in the description of this video, so feel free to use that. I've put some comments in there that explains the numbers and where to find them. So in this example, just like we had described, we had Temple winning by 0.2 points. However, this game is at Cincinnati, so we're going to put in a home court factor. This year, the home court edge has been bouncing between 2 and 2.1 points per game, meaning the home teams are outperforming their expectations slightly. In previous years, you'll see that number more like 3 to 4. And again, you can find the type of home court edge on sites like Ken Pomeroy and Sagarin. So this is our baseline projection for this game. We expect Cincinnati to win this game by approximately 2 points. The spread for this game is actually 6.5 points. So from a value perspective, if we bet Temple, we get 6.5 points as them being underdogs. And we only expect them to lose by 2. So there's 4 to 5 points of value when looking at this baseline projection. But what I like to do is make sure that baseline is the most predictive as we would expect. Because you want to factor in injuries, personnel changes, recent play. So let's dig into Temple and Cincinnati's profiles. I'll show you how I pulled the data I did, and we will look at each of those teams. So this is barttorvik.com. You'll notice the teams are in rows, and then we have columns. So Gonzaga, and then this is their adjusted offensive efficiency and adjusted defensive efficiency. The numbers above that are the national averages. So that's where I got the 102, and that's where I got the 68.4. Those change every day, but they don't change enough, in my opinion, to make a big difference. So if you were to update your national averages, your D1 averages, once a week, I think that's going to be fine. Typically, what we see over the course of a season is teams get a little more efficient and they get a little slower. So I expect pace to drop a little bit over the final month of the season and the offensive or the average efficiency to go up a little bit over the course of the season. That will not move much on a daily basis, but if you forget about it over a couple of weeks, it could have an impact on you. So we want to find Temple versus Cincinnati. So I'm going to scroll down and grab Temple, which I'm going to Control F if they don't pop up soon. I don't remember where they're ranked. So let's find Temple. There they are. So again, 102.4, 97.1, and 67.8. Here's the fun stuff with Bart Torvik. This is their team page. So as I look at Temple's team page, this is kind of a summary of their year. That's what we use to make our baseline projection. And then this is game by game adjusted efficiencies. And this is why I prefer Bart Torvik over Ken Pom. So we want to come up with, is 102.4 a good predictor of what we expect this offense to have from an adjusted efficiency standpoint? Is that a good median projection for this upcoming game? So let's look at their data for the year for adjusted offensive efficiency. We see quite a few games right around 100, which is very close to their 102. And then we see a 118, which is 16 points higher. And we see a couple that are 14 points higher. The amount of outliers that are above their prediction as opposed to below would lead me to shade this a little bit. So what I mean by that is I'm going to drop their 102.4 season-long number and say, you know, based on what I'm seeing, outliers, recent play, all that sort of stuff, I'm going to drop it to 101.5. I do that, and our 2-point line just went to 2.5. So I want to do that for Temple's offense, defense, and Cincinnati's offense and defense. So let's hop back in to Temple's profile. Again, we're in Temple, and looking at adjusted defense. That looks more consistent than their offense. There is one outlier here, 112.8. That's about 17 points higher than their average, and I see a few that are 13 to 14 below. So kind of the opposite story as their offense. I would say their defense is slightly better than what their profile suggests, and I would also recommend shading that just a little bit, and we'll make it a 96.5. You choose your numbers. You can leave them alone and say, you know what, their average is what their average is. There will be teams that you pull them up and it stands out like, wow, this is like two different teams. Sometimes there's major injuries. The year Zion Williamson got hurt for Duke after his shoe exploded, I had a Duke profile with Zion and a Duke profile without. So if he was going to play, I knew what I was going to use for a predictor. And if he didn't play, I had that kind of lined up as well prior to the lines coming out. So Temple's done. This is what I would project Temple in terms of adjusted offensive efficiency. Now, their points per possession are going to change based on what we do with Cincinnati. So let's dig into Cincinnati now. You can get there a couple ways. You could just choose to drop down and choose Cincinnati, but since they are on the schedule here, we'll just click on Cincinnati's name and it'll take us there. Here's their profile for the year. That's the data we use to create our baseline projection. Now let's look at their game-by-game efficiency. We're expecting a number around 100.9. So looking at Cincy's offense, they are consistently right around there, but they've had a few outlier performances. I think you could shade that up, but not much. Maybe to 101, 101.5, something like that. So let's go ahead and do that for Cincinnati. We'll make it 101.3. The spread is now up to 2.4 points. Let's hop in and take a look at their defense. This is their adjusted defensive column. And you see 4 performances in green, 1 in red. That's telling me that we have more outliers that are occurring with a poor defensive performance than a good. More likely that they exceed the expectation in terms of a good defensive performance. The last 4 games, it's looking like, oh boy, I don't know, closer to 0.9 points per possession. So this still happened. This is a real situation that occurred in a game. They gave up that many points per possession. So I don't know whether you completely throw it out. It is possible, but again, I'm looking for a median, and I'm going to bring down their defensive efficiency even more from where it is in our projection. So let's hop back in, and let's drop that to 95. So I feel good about the adjustments we made, and we now have Cincy as a 3-point favorite in this game. Current line, as of going live here, was 6.5 points. So betting Temple has 3.5 points of value. I like to see at least 3 points of value when I am making a play. But having your own point spread now gives you that curb as to when this game is no longer valuable from a betting perspective. So if that line moved, so if I told you at 10 o'clock at night, Temple's 6.5 point underdogs, I think it's closer to a 3-point game, I would bet Temple. Maybe you don't get around to doing that until closer to tip. The line is now 5.5. Would you still bet it? You could, but I would stop at 6. So if the line was 6 points, I would still say, yeah, there's enough value there. That's a full possession. Go for it. If it dropped to 5.5, 5, that's the no thanks for me. But every bet has 2 sides. Typically, when you listen to a show, they talk about one side. If for whatever reason this was recorded before the lines came out, and we were just going through that day's schedule, and it's like, hey, we got Cincinnati by 3. If that line comes out where Cincinnati's a pick'em or Cincinnati's a slight underdog, now there's value on the Cincinnati side. So typically, I don't run it until I have something to reference, but there will be times where I'm doing look-ahead lines just to see what I expect upcoming, like on a busy Saturday or something like that. So we have handicapped our first game. We have Cincinnati winning this game by 3 points. Today is February 12th, 2021. That game will take place in a few hours, so you can look up the box score and see if we would have won that bet or not. My goal is to win 100% of the bets, but it's it's realistic to expect to win 53 to 58%, like I was saying earlier.